Thomas. It's a true honor to meet you today. I am a huge fan of Bach, and I became a big fan of yours because of not only your playing, but your um, passion for his music and how much time and effort, obviously, it has taken you a huge chunk of your life. You spent dedicating yourself to a Bach's music. I sent you some questions that I'd love to hear your answers. First question: what makes you the most proud about your path as a musician?
Um, yes, wonderful question. And first of all, thank you so much for your wonderful words. And it's a great honor and pleasure for me to be here, of course. And so, regarding my path as a musician, probably if I can say something valuable at this point in time in my life, is that I've always taken on new challenges in different stages of my development and my growth as a musician. And so far, I have never turned down a great challenge that was presented to me. And I tried my best to go always all the way into the challenge. And this is probably something I wish to retain, for all the rest of my life or for the future. I hope as much as I can and to preserve that spirit and that fundamental, maybe in a good sense, you can call it a warrior spirit or something like that. It's a metaphor I like to use, of course, metaphorically. Yes, probably that's the one thing I would say makes me more proud in a humble way, of course.
Of course. Yes, great. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing. Tell us a little bit about your family, your teachers, your first lessons. When did you decide you're going to be the pianist?
Yes, wonderful thing to talk about. And I did not start too early. I was 8 years old in Italy. My mother was really wonderful in deciding to have me take some piano lessons. And my first teacher, whom I should credit, Grazia Galletta, she's very sweet, wonderful, and talented teacher. I was very grateful to her, of course, for the first year I spent developing. And the decision to become a pianist and to pursue this path professionally was not really a decision as much as myself finding myself to a point where I could do nothing else but this, and it was a matter of absolute urgency and not definitely not based on a calculation or on a rational kind of decision. And then going back to my growth and my upbringing, it was fortunately I say fortunately for myself, for the type of personality I am, I was not raised only in music. I had the opportunity to experience a lot of different sides of life, I would say, as I was a child and an adolescent. And also, I was exposed to many different situations and many different influences. So I was not raised only as a musician. I somehow felt, and I still feel that music is a huge part of my life, but is not everything and is also not the end goal. I still pursue music as probably the most important thing I do in my life, but as directed towards something beyond music. That's another thing that is very important to me. For instance, if you want to discuss a bit of Bach and the reason why I took on these projects, certainly it's because of the love of the music and the challenge itself, which is incredibly rewarding and fulfilling, of course. But there is also the desire um, to have music as a path towards something else, which is some greater form of growth, or perhaps, if I can use the word, spiritual too, in that sense. Although it's an old-fashioned word today that is often misused or not used at all. But certainly that's my overall vision, and I think I have this since I was very young. I think I felt this music as a path and music as a path towards something beyond music. Yeah, broadly
That's
speaking.
beautiful. That is beautiful. If you want to mention your teachers again and maybe your relationship with the teachers who helped you to become who
Yes,
you are today.
of course. I mentioned, well, Grazia Galletta, my first teacher. Then after I had another wonderful teacher, Alessandro Fortuna, with whom I graduated in Italy. I also had other mentor figures, and particularly two composition teachers, Gianni Possio and Elisabetta Brusa from the conservatories of Milan and Turin. I also had wonderful teachers in high school. Anna Marchi was a great teacher of Latin and Greek. Actually, she was a very important figure in those years. And Gianna Ferrari, I mentioned everybody really. Those were very important people. My middle school teacher, I know it sounds a little, very back in time, but those people made very much a difference, I would say, in my life. And later I came to the US and I studied with Achucaro and Pamela Paul, whom you read in the bio, great pianists, incredible influence on me. Yes, and I also studied composition with Kevin Hanlon and Joseph Klein, two wonderful composers in America here in Texas.
Great. Is composing helping you? How composing is helping you see the music you performing, Bach music, let's say? Because I'm not a composer, so I'm just curious. Being a composer and a pianist, do you feel there is a different view of music from being a composer in your head to if you were not, let's say, a composer?
Yes, and of course, first of all, I, out of humility, I don't want to call myself necessarily one of those, very ambitious and dedicated professional composers. I keep composition as something very important in my life, but which maybe belongs to a more intimate dimension, a little more intimate than I would say performance, which is more public in my case. And your question is wonderful because I feel there is really a connection. There might be, in my case, and if anything, it is perhaps a certain kind of freedom that it maybe having experimented a little bit with composition, with direct creativity in music, with creating music directly rather than interpreting it, might generate some kind of freedom once, at least in my case, once I have to approach the music on the score, and it might have made easier in my case the process of reliving the music instead of simply executing the music, but actually recreating the music. I think that's perhaps the best definition of performance I can give. I don't think performance is in any, and I don't think any serious pianist thinks that, of course. I mean, performance is in no way mere execution, but it's actually a creative endeavor, very much a creative endeavor. I would say not much different, not really different from composition per se, in a very deep sense. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive and controversial, because in order to really perform, you have to literally recreate the music out of nothing. Okay, you have the notes on the page, you do, but only apparently this makes it easier. I think it is really a process of living the music so deeply and so intimately, as if you were creating it in the moment. And that's why some of the artists I personally admire the most are those who make me listen to the music as if they are creating it in the moment. And a great example for me is Claudio Rao, a pianist I dearly love. And everything he plays sounds like he's connected to the origin, to the source, and he's creating the music in the moment, almost as if he were improvising it. And that's also the best definition I can give of the adjective original, as connected to the origin. That's really original art. Is not extravagant or art or mindlessly new, simply new for the sake of novelty. That doesn't make much sense, right? The original art is art that's connected with the origin, which is the source, the very source of life and creativity. Yes, sorry, but broad answer to the question.
That's
I hope it
great.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
Wonderful. Next question. Share the journey of mastering and performing Well-Tempered Clavier.
Well, this was, as you said in the introduction, very demanding, and it took a huge part of my life. If I look back at that particular experience of, starting from almost from scratch, I have to say it's almost like a chapter, a huge chapter of my life. And so, of course, I had some background because some of them I had to study, although not nearly deep enough as I was supposed to do back in time when I was a young student. So I had a few of them actually in those programs that the old Italian programs that I had to study for, although I took the exams as a private student, but I had to take one of the exams, the 8-year exam, two years before final graduation. And you were supposed to be able to play 24 of them with 2 days in advance. So they would pick one out of 12 and 12 from book one and 12 from book two. Indeed, you had 1 or 2 days to actually review it, but it's almost impossible in that age, to study them, so many of them really seriously. Although I read them through, at least I did read them through a good amount of them.
Quick question. Just to clarify, was it a requirement to learn 24 prelude and fugues in Italy?
Yes, it was
It was
until a few
required?
years ago. These programs were from the 1930s, I believe, 20s, 30s. I believe they were devised by Alfredo Casella, who was a phenomenal pianist and composer back in time, and actually under the fascist regime. And they stayed in place until very few years ago when they changed the system. And of course, the requirement, and pretty much for everybody, was to have to read through 12 of them from the first book and 12 from the second of your choice, to the point that you would then be able to somehow perform one that was chosen by the jury with 1 day advance. So it's not really learning them. I would say it's more or less reading them through. To learn them is something else. It's not comparable to that. And I don't think anybody ever, maybe in the past they were more serious, and but pretty much everybody was surviving through that. Was and I also, it's kind of questionable to have so much material. Maybe there is some benefit, but yeah, that was a requirement though. Well,
Yeah, please continue. So,
yes.
when did this idea came to you? I'm going to, learn all 48 and perform them live in public. Did you just how did it occur?
So great question. I love unearthing these things and remembering, having these wonderful memories. So what really struck me well, I have to give credit. First of all, I have to give credit to my wife, who back in 2017 or something, some around that time, my wife Ludmila, she told me out of the blue, you must learn the Well-Tempered Clavier completely, beginning to end, because it will. I don't know why, but I feel it will be appreciated. It will make some kind of impact. And I was like,
He's right.
seriously. So really, the very first impulse came from her, and I have to give her lots of credit for that. Then I remember around the same time discovering the recording of Richter, Sviatoslav Richter, and that was to me almost like, which I didn't know, but I listened to it differently, and I remember it was the G sharp minor from book one. And it hit me in the face, literally. I felt there is so much unspeakable depth to this music and to the way this artist is interpreting the music. And it was Bach, but it was also the personality and the genius of Richter, whom I still really adore as an artist. I think is probably, at least in my case, one of the greatest inspirations for me. Very humble, when we try to sit on the shoulders of the giants, one of them for me is Richter with Bach. And I then began, I actually took the decision to learn the first book. And as an early training, I learned the first. I remember I took a long time to work out the first few, which again, I knew somehow from my earlier years. But then I took the Richter recording, and I wanted to be able to do the same kind. Yes, technically, I wanted to know what was the secret of producing that kind of three-dimensional polyphony. there is something magical, not only Richter, of course, but that particular way of playing the piano, which is very Russian, I would say, extremely polyphonic, came to me through Richter, through that recording, and particularly the first fugue. First was G sharp minor, now the C major fugue from book one from his 1970 recording, 1973 recording. The sense of three-dimensional polyphony and the way these voices are, this clearly outlined on a clear foreground with the other voices in the background, is realized in that case of Richter in such a mesmerizing and beautiful and enchanting way. I wanted to be able to do the same, so I experimented a lot, literally passage by passage with Richter's recording, almost as if Richter were my teacher then. If you think of that, it's a very similar process than having a mentor that tells you, do this or do that, and try to do this. And the only thing you have to figure out the way to do it on your own, because we are talking something that not really, I don't think it can be really taught to this level. A little bit, yes, some of the basic devices technically to use to produce polyphonic sound, polyphonic playing, but really that's at this level, it's purely a matter of experimentation. So I think it took me months to work on that first fugue. I remember it took me several months until I was able to play fluently with that kind of polyphonic and dynamic depth, which is difference between the voices. Which again, I was not new to this. I was taught this, of course, as a child, and I did play lots of music in the past, and I played Bach, but this was a next step for me, a new level, of course. After that, I played the first three in public for a while, and then the first six, I had one performance only. And after that, I went directly to the whole thing. I took the decision I have to go through the whole volume, and I had to learn it as fast as I can. So in about a year, I had it under my fingers, and that's where I gave those performances. One of them is the YouTube video that you know. So this process was with, somehow taking place between 2017 and 2020, those 3 years, with the last year devoted to actually learning and mastering the first book. And after that, I went to the second book with, of course, more equipped for the challenge. Yes.
Wonderful. And so, yeah, besides Richter, there is Gould recordings and Tatiana Nikolaeva. I don't know if you know who she was. But other than that, I actually don't even know. Google did not tell me a straight answer. I don't know why. How many pianists are there who have performed the two books? So I think it's a fantastic journey and a great decision, which I'm sure you find very rewarding. Okay, great. Next. So what do you feel are core values of being an artist today?
Oh, wonderful question. And so just to clarify, you mean what the core values of an artist should be, in my opinion?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, of course, because there is, and again, I don't want to say anything that is in any way polemic or negative, of course, and I don't have in any way a kind of polemic spirit approaching any topic, I would say. At the same time, it's impossible for me not to, very humbly try to give my voice, my opinion on what are quite difficult times I think we are living regarding the meaning and the purpose of art making and music making. And I think there are at least two different sets of values one can decide to embrace. And again, I don't want to sound too much black and white, and I don't want to generalize, but today we are very much exposed to this values of, what you could call a certain kind of surface success or stardom, which I personally feel do not have much to do with genuine music making and art making. So to answer your question, I certainly do not believe in that superficial image of success that sometimes comes to us through this image of the celebrity and the star or the superstar, which again, I can deeply respect as an artist, I don't think it has to do with the essence of that artist. There is it's sort of a persona that is superimposed on the artist and that doesn't have much to contribute to the essence of the art and music making of that artist, in my opinion. So the core values, what they should be, certainly not that of the pursuit of pure worldly success and stardom. But again, I think we should ask ourselves probably, what is the meaning and the purpose of making music and making art? And is there a greater meaning than simply fulfilling a very legitimate desire or passion one has? Is there something bigger and greater we can do through making music and making art? Can we actually have an impact on the world, on others? And I think it is possible. So I would say direct the purpose of music and art outside of the self. That's the first thing. Like don't just let it be a sort of a fulfillment of egoic basic instincts, which again we need to have to a certain extent. We need to have this public persona, and we have an ego, which is again, it's only a structure that we need. But how can I bend that purpose towards something greater than me? That's the first thing I think I can ask myself as an artist. And probably the decision to take on Bach has had something to do with that too. I somehow maybe felt that the need of our time, a sort of thirst or spiritual thirst, not only for that music, but also for a very vital interpretation of that music. And that again, I think it costed me more than the fulfillment that I'm getting out of that experience. I mean, the cost is immense, it's incredible. There is no way, I think, to do something like this unless you direct the purpose away from the self, outside. And that's something maybe I'm naive with that, but maybe I'm an idealist, but it's something I want to believe very much so. And I also feel the crisis of meaning sort of we are going through, and I don't know, if you look at many musicians and artists, I don't see a general state of happiness, honestly. I see a lot of open questions and dissatisfaction. And maybe one of the solutions would be exactly to try to operate with art and with music as if I put myself in service instead of pursuing something for myself, instead of directing the purpose towards myself, I direct it outwards. And again, it's not easy to talk about these things. I'm articulating it in a very abstract way. So if you want to dig deeper or tell me, of course.
Yeah,
and
I think this is beautiful and understood very well. So, but let me ask you this. So what is happiness? You talked about happiness.
Yes.
What is it to you?
Great question. I love these questions. And again, maybe, again, to answer this question, I have to be a little bit indirect. Maybe I don't believe much in happiness. Well, we can give different meanings to these words, right? At least two different meanings. One meaning is maybe the most commonly understood, and in our world and in our times, probably it's related to an idea of excitement and positivity and fulfillment of a psychological well-being, which is often tied to actual achievement or to circumstantial and an external world validation and circumstances, right, that affect us. So I'm happy if I actually manage to establish myself in a certain way, to get certain results, to have the things that I must have, to have the position that I must have, and then or to have the family, the wife, whatever it is. And I don't believe in this idea of happiness personally. I think it's very misleading. It's a bottomless pit of descent into dependence on circumstances. Actually, there is another idea of happiness which has to do deeply with acceptance of the struggle, whatever it is, in a heroic way, or acceptance and embrace of suffering and purpose. And probably that's the greatest fulfillment that can happen, can arrive to a person, is to be directed towards one's purpose, whatever it is, rather than
Beautiful
chasing.
and
I'm trying to
agreed.
become less
It,
abstract. Yeah, but okay, no,
mhm.
sorry.
No,
Thank
no,
you.
it's really great. Tell us a little bit about your, if you have any hobbies, what are they?
Well, yes, I would say everything I do is related somehow to, again, a sense of purpose. I try to give myself one thing that I particularly love and I need vitally, and might come as a surprise, but is uh, uh, to work a little bit also with the visual dimension, particularly with photographs. And I have cultivated, very humbly, of course, and as you say, as a hobby, you could say that, but also with purpose, the practice of mindful picture taking and photography. And actually, one of the most important people that had one of the greatest impacts in my life, which I have not quoted earlier because we were only talking about music teachers, but is a great artist and writer, Giovanni Chiaramonte, a great Italian photographer, and I would say philosopher and poet too. I mean, he was really a Renaissance man, whom I actually, incredibly, this man, I remember seeing his photographs on a textbook in school, some art photographs, back in Italy when I was a kid. I was in high school, in early high school, and I was immediately hit by the beauty of these photographs, which were very spiritual and you know, it was landscape and urban photography. Now, I could sense there was a philosophical and poetic depth to these images. For years, I had cultivated the passion for the art of this man. And finally, in 2019, I decided to send him an email. It was around this same time I was actually working on Bach, on the first book. And after 2 weeks, incredibly, he replies to me and he sets up a meeting in Milan and I go visit him. And after that, I visited him many times. He spent so many hours with me. He and also his assistant at the time, wonderful lady, Laura Geronazzo was her name. And incredibly, both of them died. They were in their 70s already, but they died very shortly, one after the other. They were very close in last year. And then, so, but the mark this man, Giovanni Chiaramonte, left on me, oh, one of the things he did with me was discuss spirituality at a very deep level. Incredibly, I have never met, and of course, I'm not saying anything with my teachers for music and incredible people, and the set, especially academic setting, does not offer the opportunity to have this depth of exploration. But I have not had the opportunity to have such a deep study and such a deep introspective process with people in music. It came from someone from the visual arts. Actually, not only visual arts, it was more than that. So, as I said, also a poet and philosopher. So yeah, that was something I definitely have to share if we talk about my overall background. And it's quite recent. We're talking 2019 to last year. Yes.
Who do you miss the most?
Oh,
Besides maybe this person that you mentioned, who else do
certainly.
you miss the most?
Well, you know, I'm here with my wife in the US, but part of my family is still in Europe. So of course there is this gap, this ocean in between, right? And my mother and my brother are still there. For instance, maybe if I can answer this in a wider sense, what I miss the most perhaps is a sense of community. You know, in our times, especially in the urban dimension. It's very difficult to live in a city, I feel, you know, for someone who is sensitive. And very often people who are so close together in a city don't even acknowledge each other's existence. I'm not sure this is completely a natural state, a natural condition. I'm nostalgic
Not.
of a,
Yeah, it's not
absolutely,
natural. No.
absolutely not. And exactly, and I have some kind of nostalgia for a dimension I have never lived, because I was born in the city. I grew up always in a very alienating environment in cities, and the city is alienating by its own nature. We are so pushed together, and we are also so alone, right, in cities. So yes, a dimension, not a collectivist, I don't like, but a communitarian, a community dimension, with authentic ties between people, is probably something I, like many other people, miss the most, certainly. Yes, in this hyper-connected and lonely
Indeed,
world.
yeah. Yeah. I blame technology for it.
Certainly. Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly. Mhm.
Yeah.
Of course, the downside of technology is
Yeah.
that.
The downside of technology, yes. Wonderful.